Section 92 of Reviews by Oscar Wilde. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. Reviews by Oscar Wilde. Edited by Robert Ross. Section 92. A Thought Reader's Novel. Pall Mall Gazette, June 5, 1889. There is a great deal to be said in favour of reading a novel backwards. The last page is, as a rule, the most interesting, and when one begins with the catastrophe or the denouement, one feels on pleasant terms of equality with the author. It is like going behind the scenes of a theatre. One is no longer taken in, and the hairbreadth escapes of the hero and the wild agonies of the heroine leave one absolutely unmoved. One knows the jealously guarded secret, and one can afford to smile at the quite unnecessary anxiety that the puppets of fiction always consider it their duty to display. In the case of Mr. Stuart Cumberland's novel, The Vasty Deep, as he calls it, the last page is certainly thrilling and makes us curious to know more about Brown the Medium. Scene: a padded room in a madhouse in the United States. A gibbering lunatic discovered dashing wildly about the chamber as if in the act of chasing invisible forms. "This is our worst case," says a doctor, opening the cell to one of the visitors in lunacy. "He was a spirit medium, and he's hourly haunted by the creations of his fancy. We have to carefully watch him, for he has developed suicidal tendencies." The lunatic makes a dash at the retreating form of his visitors, and, as the door closes upon him, sinks with a yell upon the floor. A week later the lifeless body of Brown the medium is found suspended from the gas bracket in his cell. How clearly one sees it all, how forcible and direct the style is, and what a thrilling touch of actuality the simple mention of the gas bracket gives us. Certainly The Vasty Deep is a book to be read. And we have read it with great care. Though it is largely autobiographical, it is none the less a work of fiction, and though some of us may think that there is very little use in exposing what is already exposed, and revealing the secrets of Polichinelle, no doubt there are many who will be interested to hear of the tricks and deceptions of crafty mediums, of their gauze masks, telescopic rods, and invisible silk threads, and of the marvellous raps they can produce simply by displacing the peroneus longus muscle. The book opens with a description of the scene by the deathbed of Alderman Parkinson. Dr. Josiah Brown, the eminent medium, is in attendance, and tries to comfort the honest merchant by producing noises on the bedpost. Mr. Parkinson, however, being extremely anxious to revisit Mrs. Parkinson, in a materialized form after death, will not be satisfied till he has received from his wife a solemn promise that she will not marry again, such a marriage being, in his eyes, nothing more nor less than bigamy. Having received an assurance to this effect from her, Mr. Parkinson dies, his soul, according to the medium, being escorted to the spheres by a band of white-robed spirits. This is the prologue. The next chapter is entitled 5 Years After. Violet Parkinson, the alderman's only child, is in love with Jack Alston, who is poor but clever. Mrs. Parkinson, however, will not hear of any marriage till the deceased alderman has materialized himself and given his formal consent. A séance is held at which Jack Alston unmasks the medium and shows Dr. Josiah Brown to be an impostor. A foolish act on his part, as he is at once ordered to leave the house by the infuriated Mrs. Parkinson, whose faith in the doctor is not in the least shaken by the unfortunate exposure. The lovers are consequently parted. Jack sails for Newfoundland, is shipwrecked, and carefully, somewhat too carefully, tended by Lakiwa, or the Star that Shines, a lovely Indian maiden who belongs to the tribe of the Micmacs. She is a fascinating creature who wears a necklace composed of 13 nuggets of pure gold, a blanket of English manufacture, and trousers of tanned leather. In fact, as Mrs. Stuart Cumberland observes, she looks the embodiment of fresh, dewy morn. When Jack, on recovering his senses, sees her, he naturally inquires who she is. She answers, in the simple utterance endeared to us by Fenimore Cooper, "I am Lakiwa. I am the only child of my father, Tall Pine, chief of the Dildoos." She talks, Mr. Cumberland informs us, very good English. Jack at once entrusts her with the following telegram, which he writes on the back of a £5 note: Miss Violet Parkinson, Hotel Kronprinz, Franzensbad, Austria. Safe. Jack. But Lakiwa, we regret to say, says to herself, he belongs to Tolpine, to the Dildus, and to me, and never sends the telegram. Subsequently, Lakiwa proposes to Jack, who promptly rejects her, and, with the usual callousness of man, offers her a brother's love. Lakiwa, naturally, regrets the premature disclosure of her passion and weeps. My brother, she remarks, will think that I have the timid heart of a deer with the crying voice of a papoose. I, the daughter of Tolpine, I, a Micmac, to show the grief that is in my heart. Oh, my brother, I am ashamed. Jack comforts her with the hollow sophistries of a civilized being, and gives her his photograph. As he is on his way to the steamer, he receives from Big Deer a soiled piece of a biscuit bag. On it is written Lakiwa's confession of her disgraceful behaviour about the telegram. His thoughts, Mr. Cumberland tells us, were bitter towards Lakiwa, but they gradually softened when he remembered what he owed her. Everything ends happily. Jack arrives in England just in time to prevent Dr. Josiah Brown from mesmerizing Violet, whom the cunning doctor is anxious to marry, and he hurls his rival out of the window. The victim is discovered, bruised and bleeding among the broken flower-pots, by a comic policeman. Mrs. Parkinson still believes in spiritualism, but refuses to have anything to do with Brown, as she discovers that the deceased alderman's materialized beard was made only of horrid, coarse horsehair. Jack and Violet are married at last, and Jack is horrid enough to send to Lakiwa another photograph. The end of Dr. Brown is chronicled above. Had we not known what was in store for him, we should hardly have got through the book. There is a great deal too much padding in it about Dr. Slade and Dr. Bartram and other mediums, and the disquisitions on the commercial future of Newfoundland seem endless and are intolerable. However, there are many publics, and Mr. Stuart Cumberland is always sure of an audience. His chief fault is a tendency to low comedy, but some people like low comedy in fiction. The Vasty Deep, A Strange Story of Today, by Stuart Cumberland. Sampson Low and Co. End of section 92. A Thought Reader's Novel.